right, everybody, welcome back to Digging Deeper with your hosts, plural.
Yes.
Ben Kafer, Robert Pedroza, and
Pete
me,
Goodman.
Pete Goodman. We are digging in deeper today. It's going to be fun, exciting.
What is digging deeper? If this is your first time ever listening, what is digging deeper?
Wow, look at that. He's looking for context.
We're like 104 episodes in, but
we should probably tell people at this
but if this is your first time ever listening,
if you've ever been to a construction site, you've seen the guy with the big digging machine. That's no.
So we had a really good,
compelling
compelling title. That's
it
why
actually started with an idea of following up our messages, like the day after, with things or ideas from the message that maybe we weren't able to get into, maybe got cut, just allowing the speaker to explain a bit more or ask questions about it. We started it, I think it was kind of a COVID thing originally. And we took it off for a while and then kind of picked it up. 100 episodes. That means that's a full 2 years we've been doing it. It's
wild.
Steady, straight up.
Yeah. The first weekend that I was here, the following week was like my employment here. The following week was the first time that we did it professionally.
Like
where
launched
we
it
were
like
like,
this,
we're gonna get good mics. We're gonna
actually go for it. Make it up.
Everything else was iPhone.
We did maybe a couple months during one. Oh, I know what it was. Actually, sorry. We did a series on the book of Mark, and the series was like all the whole theme, the picture, everything was like excavating and stuff. And
interesting.
Yeah,
this is before both of our times.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I forgot the name of the series, but it all was like looking at who Jesus was. And we had an opening video where an archaeologist was digging and dusting off the ground. And it was looking through Mark. And so then we said, let's come back the next day and dig deeper. That's where it actually started.
There you go.
But when that series ended,
the more you know.
It ended with the series. It was only a 2 or 3 month walk through Mark. And then maybe about a year or 2 years later, when you got here, we decided to make it an official podcast
awesome.
every week.
Yeah. I love that we do it. I think it's awesome. I think so many people get to hear all the things that didn't make it into a sermon, but they also get to hear all the different behind the scenes of what happens on a Sunday morning.
Exactly.
At church.
And that's right.
So, yeah. And sometimes even just like last week, I don't know, because I love to listen to these just because they're fun to listen to. Even when I'm on them, I'll still listen to it, even though my voice drives me nuts. But sometimes it's even just a complete right turn from the message itself that ends up in a great discussion about something else. It is cool to do that. Yeah. So Ben, I asked you to join us this morning for that reason. And it's so random and interesting that you set it up that way.
It's like you knew.
Like you knew where we were going to go.
You know my tricks.
So yesterday we started a new series. It was called Calibrate. We're looking at the churches that are addressed in the opening chapters of Revelation. And we also had the first of the month, we kind of decided we were going to dedicate to letting one of our elders give updates on the whole process of replacing Brandon. And it went long, longer than, it was good. It was good, but it went long. I think we had scheduled it for 5
minutes.
and it went
13.
20. Yeah. And so there was this moment, and I thought it'd be fun to talk about, where you're texting me from behind the stage, and I'm over in the back of the auditorium. You're like, should I cut song here? What should I do? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how long they're gonna go.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting, the way that whole system works. So maybe just kind of behind the curtains, what does the process look like? What when we start a service? We've obviously planned things. We've walked through things. What is for someone that has never seen how we do things? What does it look like leading up to before a service starts?
Yeah, I'm very much a planner. I mean, it's probably different for different worship pastors or different people that have some ownership of services at different churches and their different cultures. The way I am, if I could have in an ideal, perfect world, I would be 6 weeks out. Every song is planned, every moment, every minute is planned, but it doesn't really work that way. We have so many other things that are super important to be a part of services, like an elder update talking about who our new lead pastor is going to be. So in those moments where and our team had already rehearsed songs, we had things ready to go and planned out. But in those moments, it's one where you have to submit to what's going to be the best thing for the church in the moment. And the best thing for the church would not have been to have us do the thing that was planned, which was 4 songs, put you up at like 45 minutes into the service and not leave until 20 minutes later than people
We've
are
been hard
used
on
to.
our kids ministry, all that stuff. Yeah.
Kids ministry. And so in that moment, I'm thinking, we have stuff that we could do. We have a plan, but the reality is the best thing is that the elders are giving this update. Ryan's giving this update with Mariah, and they're taking the time that's necessary to share it. And what I loved about it was we could have done it in 5 minutes. We could have, even between services, said, hey, we need to like really cut this down because we had this and this and this and this planned. But the reality is taking the time that it did, I think was actually a good and necessary thing for our church to see, like, oh, our elder is a human, Mariah is a human, and they're just asking questions. They're talking about it, having a conversation that is relatable and not just like a 5-minute, just like information download with super polished and perfect words. Like we didn't need that. And we also didn't need multiple songs.
Okay, not too.
Yeah. Now, the part of me that hurts a little bit is the song that we cut was actually a new song that I was super pumped about. But we're going to do that.
You had 2 new songs playing yesterday? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What were the songs called?
Usually.
What was the second? What was the name of the second song you did, Ben?
Running.
Just to be clear, how exactly do you spell running?
RUNNIN.
Okay.
With a little apostrophe thing?
Was there an apostrophe? Is running with apostrophe or just running period?
No, it was written by a church in North Carolina. So
they don't use G's in North Carolina.
I mean, East County, San Diego.
That's awesome.
Running.
So, but hold on, let's actually take a step back because it was actually worse than that. Because so on Mondays we get together in the afternoon, so we'll do it later today. And
when I suggested that we do 3 songs.
Well, no, I'm saying but on Mondays we talk through yesterday and then we look ahead to next week.
Yeah.
And usually what happens is it's like, okay, well, here's what the speaker is preaching about. So let's put the service together in a way that makes sense. On Monday of last week, I hadn't written anything. And I'm like, I'm going to work on it tomorrow. I wrote it on Saturday afternoon.
Confessions of a preacher.
So you
okay.
I'm like, well, here's kind of what I think I'm going to talk about, and you're like, well, okay, well, I'll pick something then. And we usually, that's perfect for you, the planner, leaving it at that, right? you're probably like, come on, give me more here. So I'm in Arizona and you text me and you said, hey, what about this song? And I think I was like driving and, my kids were being my kids behind me. And I'm like, I'll look at it later. And the truth is I just didn't. And I get back into town on Friday night and Saturday morning. I come in the office and I start working on my message. And I'm about 95% done. And I think to myself, wait, what was the song Ben was doing at the end? And I pull it up and it's a good song, but I'm like, I'm not sure how to like transition back into that song. I'm like, I don't know. Because I told him on Monday where I was going, but I kind of.
Oh, see, this is new information for
right.
me.
So I'm
I don't know
like,
about this.
But I think
this
to myself,
good.
like, it's Saturday. I don't want to bug Ben on a Saturday. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So Sunday morning, I wake up and I come in and I just, usually my process is to like grab my message and just go through it once. Yeah. And I'm going through it and I'm like, the whole time I'm just thinking, I don't know how to go into that song. So I pull out I'm like, okay, what I need to do is I need to like change the ending. I forgot my computer at home. So I don't have my computer to type or edit. And I texted my wife to bring it with her. She's like, I'm not coming till like 9 o'clock. And I'm like, okay. So I have a pen. I'm trying to like make notes.
Oh man, you can only use the computer in my office.
And then, my message was on my laptop. So I'm just like, so we actually went and like prayed as a team, what we need to do. And then when we finished, it's like 8:20 and I'm just like, I gotta say something.
Oh,
so I go to Ben, I'm like, Ben, can we move that song? Cause I just am not. And I felt bad because I'm like, so for you're like, I want to plan 6 weeks out. I'm coming to you at 8:30. So before any of the elder stuff happened, I actually asked you to already change the service.
So we're going to have 4 songs up front.
We were going to do 3 songs, and then I was going to preach, and then they were going to come back and do a song.
And you changed it to 4 songs
up
front.
Can you just move that end song at the beginning? Because I can't, I don't see myself transition. So that was the first change of the morning. And then once when we get in the service, the thing's going super long, and you're like, wait, should I even do 4 songs? And it was a crazy morning that way.
Yeah, you stress me out, Pete.
Yeah.
No, it's
He's joking, but he's real.
It's a.
He's like, I'm just kidding.
I'm just kidding.
It's a good thing. I mean, it's a way to keep things fresh and exciting, and
Yeah.
it's a growth opportunity for me. I mean, I came from a church that had 7 campuses, and I was the programming director. Like that was my experience for the 4.5 years before here. So all that I ever really knew was you make a plan and you send it to 7 campuses and you like rinse and repeat to all the campuses. Yeah. So like that kind of thing has always been new for me and has always been actually more of a challenge for me. But I've been super encouraged because I think our team, and not just worship team, production team, but like our church staff, and a lot of our church leaders are really flexible and really go with the flow. And I think it all comes back to that sentiment that I said earlier, which is what's going to be the best thing for this overall. And if like we let our own preferences or our own like lines in the sand dictate that, it's not going to be beneficial for the whole thing.
Someone should preach a message.
I would say that almost sounds like the message you preached, where you're kind of talking about really what it's all about.
You set that up as well. Oh, look at that!
Yeah, that was impressive.
Right into his
Okay,
trap.
man, he is good. A planner indeed. If
I actually had Pete send me his message notes right before this. So
man, what a planner! That was great, though. That was good. Well, let's talk about your message a little bit, Pete, because you preached on the first letter to the church in Ephesus last week. Kind of give us a rundown of
Have you
the
been to
series.
Greece? You've been to Rome, but have you been to Greece?
I have not. No.
I know Brandon has. I would love to see those ruins someday.
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So no, I haven't been there. I haven't been to Israel or any of those things either. So
wait till my kids grow up and
they'll
get out of
remember
the
it.
house.
yeah, something like that.
They don't travel.
Oh, you're not taking them with you.
No.
It's like,
I don't have that kind of money.
times 3 more at least, but 4 more. You got 4. Okay, but tell me a little bit about of this new series and your message and how you kind of kicked off.
Sure. I mean, I know most people, hopefully, that are watching Dig Deeper were there. If you haven't, you're probably better off listening to it before Dig Deeper.
Yep.
But yeah, it started for me a couple months ago, honestly, when this was becoming a reality. And I started thinking through, okay, what does that look like? And you had all the plans for all of the administrative side of potentially trying to replace Brandon, or at least survive without Brandon for a season.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was like, oh, we also got to talk about, he asked me, he's like, well, what do you want to preach about? Because he had already planned out like all the way through, I think, August or so before he knew he was leaving. Yeah. And so I told him like, I probably would want to do something that, is more something I'm coming up with, just something I'm more passionate about or hearing from the Lord for myself. So I decided just to spend some time praying about it. And it just kept coming back into my head. What was interesting, and I had a conversation with someone last night who was very early on part of Rise City. He was a member of our team and actually interned with us, I think in 2014, 2015. Wow. And he's back in town for a wedding, and we had a great time to reconnect last night. But we were talking about how quickly time goes by, and there was even this sense of like, when I had this thought of like, I was thinking to myself about how, okay, Rise is in this new transition season. We're not a church plant anymore. What is our future? And I was thinking about how, that was happening at the Church's Revelations. I shared that, and what would it look like for them to receive these messages? And I mentioned it to Brandon, and he's like, well, I see that's kind of cool. I was like, here's the problem though. I feel like we kind of just did this, like I'm like, I know, like we just did a message about Revelation pretty recently, and like I don't want to just do it again. It feels weird. And Brandon is like, wait, when I did that, I did a different topic, but I used those passages. Like, when do you think I did that? And I was like, well, that was like was that like 2021 or
I was about to say, I was like,
I was
what are you
gonna say, I've
talking about?
never
I was
heard
like,
him talk
And
about
he
it.
was like-
when are you talking about we just did this?
He was
I'm
like,
so confused.
that was 2015. I was like, wait, what? That was 9 years ago? I was like, oh,
when
man.
you were saying we just did
Where
this,
did
I
my
was
life
so
go?
confused
We
for a
just did
second.
that. That was the second year of Rise City.
I was so confused.
The third?
I just,
Third, yeah.
but it was like,
Crazy.
that's just in my brain. I'm like, wait, what year is it? Where am I?
Whoa.
So I was like, okay. And I went back and kind of looked at it, and I didn't want to just be repeating what he said. He used the core scriptures, but different take on them. So,
Sure.
so yeah, I just felt like each of the passages offered something to help us move forward from a kind of behind the scenes perspective, and as kind of talking about the way that we plan and think as well. Sometimes we do series that are extremely connected, where you take an idea that's too big to talk about on a Sunday and you break it up over 4 weeks.
Yeah.
When you do that, it's very difficult to not do it yourself, because like if
It's a
I have one,
conversation that you want to.
if I have one idea that I'm breaking up over 4 weeks, I want to keep the thought going. So that kind of series, we don't do a ton of, but sometimes we do. Usually when we do those series, like Brandon will just teach all of them himself. Or it'll be like, hey, I'm taking 3 weeks off. Pete, you have 3 weeks, and I'll have this one thing I do for 3, something like that. So I knew that I wanted, and we've talked about this. I didn't want this to be like, hey, Brandon's gone, Pete's going to preach every week. I wanted this, obviously you're a great preacher, Robert. I wanted Mariah back on the stage. Wanted a chance for people to hear from one of our elders.
Yeah.
So for me, this series was also an opportunity to like, each of these churches, there's a theme about like, hey, here's a message for our church, but you could grab any of them and not, it doesn't matter if you're here last week. So when you preach, I think you're doing Laodicea. It's not going to matter what I said 2 weeks earlier, or what Mariah says the next week, or anything like that. So that the series kind of made sense for that way. So it kind of gave messages for our future, but also anybody could kind of step in any week and grab one of the churches. It was kind of a good fit as we're in this sort of weird, we don't know what's going on season. So that's kind of where it came from and why I want to do it. So,
And you started with the church in Ephesus,
Yep.
who had lost the love that they had at first. Now, one of the things that I would love to talk about more and more is, what does it practically look like? Because you kind of talked about like how, we want to be a church that's known for our love. And you kind of mentioned like, what does it look like? And you turned to, Jesus laid down his life for us, and we should also lay down our lives for brothers and sisters. But what does that actually look like? Like, give us some examples of how that actually plays out in a relationship, how that plays out in our church. What does it look like to be a truly loving church? That's part of our vision statement, is to be a loving and life-giving church who brings hope and healing in Jesus' name. What does it actually practically look like to be loving?
that's a fun question. There's so many places I can go in my head with that. Because of, again, you started by saying, what's the purpose of digging deeper? I always think of like, how can I use this time? How can we use this time to share things that people might not know about or behind the scenes? That's what I'm saying. A couple things that, and I'm answering your question, but they're both kind of in play. So I actually first, this is kind of a roundabout. I had done something with these letters as a youth pastor a long time ago. And every time I preach, I save everything. Like when you write a message, it's like, as a musician, maybe the same thing, like write a song or something, or like you just save it. It's something you created. So I have a file. I can go back to 2006 maybe and still find stuff that I'd written. So I remember I remember being asked once to preach about this passage of Ephesus. What did I say? And I opened it up. It was from 2009. And I hadn't even, I remember at the time I was just starting seminary, I think. And I read what I wrote and I was like, I don't agree with any of that.
No way.
Isn't it wild?
So here's what happened. Let me explain this briefly. Like I had just finished a internship that I did in Colorado. And the group that I did the internship with was, and I don't want to say anything. There's nothing in my heart that is coming across or feeling like against them or negative. But I would say like it was a ministry and a group of people that were extremely dedicated to like prayer, intercession, phrases like intimacy with God were huge. Everything was about passion and fervor. The guy that ran it, his hero was Charles Finney, like the fire of God. It was very, very emotional.
Sounds
based.
good.
It was good. It was a great 2 years of my life. But also, I had remembered him preaching, and he didn't have, he wasn't somebody that was looking at historical context or anything. I remember him preaching a message a couple years earlier with that passage. And his whole point was first love is like the passion you have at the beginning. And his whole point was like, you guys are doing the right things, but you've lost your passion for Jesus, and you need to regain your passion for Jesus. And it was basically like a youth camp rally message, right? Like, you got to have passion for Jesus, Braveheart, like roar, And I took that and preached it to these kids, like first love, don't lose your passion for Jesus. And I'd been married at the time for like 6 months. Wow. And I even was reading comments I had made about, having passion for my wife and things. At no point when I had written that message did I ever consult another scholar or anyone else. Did I look at the words in the Greek language? Did I actually ask historically how those words were used? And now that was probably 15, 16 years ago. And I'm looking back and I'm like, man, I'm kind of like, I almost regret saying that to those students, because and I know sometimes it can feel cold and kind of like whatever, like, oh, the languages, but the idea of you having passion or like a strong, like giddiness, maybe, that when Americans say first love, that's usually what they mean. Like how romance. How I felt when we first started dating, which honestly, that is part of human physiology that's necessary for relationships to function. Like God had to create us that way, because it forces two people to bond together, but it was never meant to exist long-term. Like no human beings live like that all the time. And so even in our relationship with God, there's something similar that happens. When we become Christians, oftentimes there is this like fervor, this intensity, and it's like it fades because that's not actually how you're created to live.
It's called a romance cycle.
Right. Well, how you're created to live
on fire
is to be committed and to be friendships and relationships, not always be giddy. So to interpret that passage as Jesus saying, I'm mad at you that you're not feeling giddy about me, and repent or I'm going to take your church away, is actually really horrible teaching, because there's going to be plenty of times in your life you don't have any feelings and you don't want to do anything for God. Just like there's times you don't want to do anything for your wife and you just want to be selfish and lazy. In fact, the word that John uses for love is the exact opposite. It's the word that actually means when you don't feel like it, now we're going to talk about whether you do it or not. That's right? Agape. That's like a commitment to another human being, even when it hurts you and you don't want to do it. So to interpret John's message as, man, you've lost your fervor and your passion, to be like the thing that Jesus was upset about. Like, no. Like your fervor and passion is going to come and go. And even like, we've been doing this for a while, and Ben, you're younger, but like, I can tell you, like, even in the past 12 months, I've mentioned before how I journal, and sometimes my journal is like, you can go and see things like, where was I in February? Where was I in, August? Passion kind of was up and down, right? There were some times I was feeling really, and other times like, oh, like passion is like, passion is good, but like, it's not the thing that Jesus was like, you're failing as a church. What he was looking at was the first form of love was not an emotion. It was a king laying down his life, and a ruler of power acting like a slave and washing people's feet. That was the first love, because that was the love that Jesus demonstrated at first. So when the followers of Jesus started the Christian movement, what they started with was, well, Jesus told us to live this way, so let's go live this way. And they were going out into the world, and they were serving people. They were dying to themselves. They were laying their lives down for each other. They were caring for the poor. They were feeding people that they weren't responsible for. You were expected to take care of your family, but if someone wasn't related to you, who cares? Let them die. The Christians were like, no, come in. Even if we have less to eat, we're going to feed you. Yeah. People were leaving babies on the side of the road as a form of abortion. The Christians were pulling them in and saying, we'll take care of you. Yeah. If your husband died and you had no family, you would probably either starve or turn to prostitution. And Christians were like, no, come in. We'll take care of you. We'll feed
orphans and widows. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, well, I'm lowly. I'm a slave. We don't care. We'll love you. We'll take care of you. That was the first love that started Christianity and started the movement. So 50 years later, you now have an established group of people who are there, the church. Well, what got them there? It wasn't that they didn't get there by having the right doctrines or things like that. what grew them from nothing to an established church in 50 years was they were following Jesus's model of loving people.
Which is radical and selfless.
Yeah. And so when you ask, like, what does it look like specifically? I mean, I think of I've used this before. And I come back to it because it's common. I think it was just a few weeks ago we were talking about the famous Supreme Court justice who was asked, "What is pornography?" And he says, "I don't know. I can't define it for you, but I know it when I see it." I think there's something about self-sacrifice. How do I define it? Well, put it in context. What does it look like in a marriage? What does it look like at a parent? Ultimately, it looks like the betterment of this other person becoming your priority.
Yes.
Their well-being being more important than how you feel or think or care about yourself.
It's great.
It is a humbling of yourself, not to say that I'm worthless, but to say I'm choosing to elevate you and do something for you that's good for you, even if it hurts me. I'm going to care about your needs and where you're at in your life. This is how we know love. Jesus laid down his life.
Yeah.
So
while we're still sinners.
Yeah. And I think, to bring this back around, it's a very small thing. And I don't also want to oversell it, because I think that you can take what you do, Ben, and you can put it into separate categories, and both of them can be like, you can say, hey, I plan and I'm super organized and planned because I love the people on my team. And if I don't plan well for them, then I'm not serving them well. Right. And so my decision to be super dedicated and plan is to make sure that these people who are giving their time are taken care of. Right. So it's loving of you to plan. On the other hand, to be able to say, hey, in this moment, letting go of my plan is what our church needs. Both of those things are walking in love. So it's not like, well, planning is loving and that's not, or that's, being freestyle is loving and planning is not loving. No, it's like in the moment, what is needed for other people and being willing to give them what's needed in the moment is living by love. And so I think it's hard to answer the question specifically.
No, it's good.
As much as paint a paradigm of it.
Yeah. Well, you talked about that on Sunday, where you talked about how 50 years in, they have a way of doing things and a way of not doing things. And some of the ways of doing things, they were actually praised for, they were commended for their deeds and their perseverance and discernment. But none of those things seem to matter in light of their love. And so
if they don't have it.
Yeah. And so as we talk about that, maybe even paralleling that to Rise City or just church in general right now and what our culture is looking like, what are some of those challenges? What are some of those deeds that we might be doing or programs that we might have? And this kind of goes back to what you talked about, youth pastor and facility worker, the systems, all that kind of stuff. What are things that this letter can serve as a warning to us, or even just a heads up, hey, don't go 1 degree this way, 1 degree this way. What are some of the challenges that we might be up against, and what are some of the consequences if we don't take care of those challenges or do it the right way?
What ways are we committing to deeds more than we are to love?
Or what could we be in the future?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll tell you where my brain was at, and I didn't outright say this. So every time we get up and preach, we've talked about this last week, you and I, a big part of what we should be doing is always guarding trust.
Yeah.
And as soon as people feel like, okay, this is turning into an agenda, you're eroding trust. So I have a very strong vested interest in attenders of Rise City Church continuing to attend Rise City Church, because I want to make sure that you guys still get paid and the lights stay on and we keep moving forward. Right? I have a deep vested interest in people not leaving the church. I have a fear, a realistic human fear, that people will leave the church. So of course, what I want to do is I want to leverage my time on a stage to make you feel guilty and bad about even thinking about leaving the church, so you'll never do it. I want to manipulate you to be don't even think about leaving. If you do, you're a sinner, that's in my brain. And I could do it. I really could do it. I could craft a message that makes you feel really dumb to even think about what a horrible person you are to think about leaving. I could start to plant those seeds. I'd be doing that out of my own fear and my own desire to control and keep you. So I tried really hard, and I don't know how well I did it. I have to go back and listen to it. I tried to keep that out as much as possible, but it's there because it's there from a self-interest standpoint, but it's also actually just there. And where it is I heard secondhand, and you heard it too. Someone had made a comment. I don't know who it was. I'm not gonna say who it was from. A comment was made. Well, I'm just waiting to see who they hire before I decide if I want to stay. And it hit me in two ways when I heard it. One way was the human, like, fearful. Oh gosh, how many other people are doing that? Don't leave, everybody. But then it also hit the pastor side of me, the side of me that actually can separate my self-interest and say that is such a sign of lack of real Christian love and maturity, that you're just sort of holding on to see what's good for you, and as soon as you feel like it might not be good for you, you're out the door. I know we're all in process, we all have our journeys, but like even the phrase church shopping feels sometimes problematic to me. Like, what do you mean you're church shopping? Like, you're like, being invested in a community of believers is not going to the mall and picking out the pants you like. It's laying down your life and serving the world around you. So in this season right now of somebody else is going to take the reins of this church, and not just like, hey, we're going to get a new worship leader or a new youth pastor. No, the person holding the future of the church in their hands is going to be different. All of us that call Rise City home are now faced with this decision that we have to make. What do we do if we don't like some of the decisions? What do we do if we don't like it? What if we're uncomfortable with it? What if it doesn't go where we want it to go? How will we respond? And I think that's the area where I'm like, more than anything, I want to plant seeds, not hopefully not in the selfish side of me that just doesn't want people to leave because, but to really like plant pastoral seeds of like, listen, let's talk about, this is an opportunity for us to actually begin to put into practice what Jesus is saying, where I say like, look, my life is not my own. I've surrendered it to a king. And if he's telling me to lay my life down and serve here, then it doesn't matter which official he puts in charge. He's still king, and he's told me to be, right? And it doesn't matter what I like, how I feel about it. To start to see life that way and to say, look, if this new leader comes in and feels, look, the best thing that, and let me give you a specific example. I could see a leader coming in and saying, hey, for 10 years, Rise City, you guys have been so good at creating health and hope and healing. And I think it's time that we maybe start to go out of our comfort zone a little bit and do a little more to reach our city, which we haven't really done a ton of, right? What if that person comes and says, I have a vision to evangelize people more. And so we're going to tail back a little bit on this area over here and put a little more emphasis on being more outreach or evangelistic. And a lot of people are like, no, that's not what I want. That's not the church that I signed up for. Or what if they come in and like, hey, I want to spend more time in the presence of God. And so we're going to worship a little bit longer than we used to. I don't, whatever, pick your thing. Direction, now I have the opportunity to say, is this about me and what I want? Or is this an opportunity for me to say, well, ultimately it's about whether we are loving our world, right? Yeah. So wherever we go, let's go, as long as it's loving the world. Yeah. I was trying to be cautious how much I leaned into that though, because again, it's like, okay, Pete's up here trying to have an agenda, and I do have an agenda. So it's hard for me to talk about it.
Well, you leaned into the general sentiment of repentance as a way of realignment.
Turning around and
changing.
And not digging into preferences.
Yeah, and I think that's a great word for us as a church. Like, as I'm thinking about this series, it feels awesome because it's like guardrails. It's like bumpers and bowling. It's like, don't go over there, don't go over there. And I think a lot of these are probably all going to come back to that same sentiment of repentance. So
I also say that if I'm being completely transparent, and you'll see, one of the things that was definitely on my mind, I didn't choose not to go there because I was afraid to. It literally is next week's topic. So when he writes the next two letters to Smyrna and Pergamum, you really now get into how will the Christian church interact with a culture that is slightly opposed to it? That's where love really shows up. And I mean, it's April. What are we, 6 months away from what might be the worst election in American history? The potential for the next 6 months to be just a catastrophe of failures of Christians to truly love their neighbor is in the air.
Yeah.
And I am not making a political statement. I've never been about necessarily doing that. I have political opinions. We all do. I want to make statements about what Jesus teaches. And I think you have legitimate opportunities that arise to talk about what Jesus teaches when it's like, okay, let's talk about what the next 6 months are probably going to look like, especially as we get into the heated moments. Like you get into the summer and then the early fall. And then after the day after the election, if your candidate wins or doesn't win, like there's a phrase in his letter to Pergamum of like, I know where you live, where Satan has his throne. I'm like, oh, California? Wait,
man, really? That's pretty triggered. Okay.
But the opportunity to really like take that in and say, okay, my first and foremost guardrail is more than being right, more than getting my way, more than having things go how I want them, more than even things going the way that I genuinely believe they should. And that's the challenge, because these people, when I said like they were commended for having knowledge, he genuinely was like, hey, good job. You are aware of truth. There are directions of our country that I, with a complete, wholehearted 100% believe are wrong and are the wrong direction. And I don't want our country to go that direction. When that happens, it's not just a random opinion, it's a core conviction. But I still have to acknowledge that loving others is a greater core conviction.
As you're asking that, it's making me think like, okay, so we have all of these opportunities for it to not go well coming up, right? Like what are, and you said it, you said what I was thinking was, I don't believe that people are like inherently out to be mean or out to be jerks about things or out to like cause like struggle. I think people genuinely have a heart for, I want to see this thing go well, and this thing is threatening that, whether that be a new pastor's thoughts or vision or the political sphere. Like we have all these things coming up. So my question is, what are some blind spots that we might have, even as we're well-intentioned? What are some blind spots that we might have just to be like watchful of? Like, hey, your temper probably shouldn't look like that. You probably shouldn't get so upset about that. Like, even if we're well-intentioned, what are some of those things?
I learned something really interesting about 2 weeks ago. Listening to another podcast. There was a study done on brain whatever mapping. The study actually showed that the part of your brain that's related to empathy, kindness, compassion, or at least even if it's not like the ability of the human brain to be like, I see where you're coming from. Like that's a part of your brain that lights up when they ask you certain questions. When there's another part of your brain that sort of lights up, and by lights up, I'm talking about like when they do like the mapping images of the brain, there's another part of your brain that lights up when you are scared. Those two never light up together.
Oh, interesting.
So when your brain is feeling with fear or you're backed into a corner, the part of your brain that is wired to have empathy is cold. It's almost impossible to have empathy when you're afraid. So there's so many ways you can go that, when you, the call of the scriptures to not be afraid, literally physiologically is part of also loving and having empathy. Because when you're when you feel threatened, when you feel like, and so like, I agree with what you just said, like inherently, and I don't want to get into this whole argument, are people naturally good or not? We're all a little bit of both. We're all created in God's image and we're all flawed. So everyone is going to have good inside somewhere, and we're all going to have brokenness inside. But like everyone has, unless you're a complete sociopath, everyone has the ability to have empathy, to think about where someone else is coming from, to be in some ways decent. But we also all have things that make us scared. We also have things that bring us fear and like threatening our comfort or our security. So in our specific example, I think a lot of people are feeling nervous and scared about the next leader of the church and like what could happen. And so instead of saying, hey, it's okay, like God's got this, and I understand where you're coming from, I understand where you're coming from, I understand where this new leader is coming from, I'm going to choose to give him a chance, the fear shuts that part of my brain down, and all I'm like, no, you're threatening me, and I gotta.
Interesting.
And so I think like right off the bat is we have to be willing to look at our fears and say, hey, this is going to have a consequence. The fears that you're feeling, just be aware of it. The fear that I'm feeling is going to affect my ability to love and have empathy on people. Yeah. Then you take that to a national level. So if candidate X gets elected, this is going to happen to me. This is going to happen to my culture. This is going to happen to gas prices. If candidate Y gets elected, this is going to happen. Civil war, I don't know. And like, pick your thing. And this fear, this like, this tightening in my heart makes it impossible for me to understand why this other person voted for candidate X. How could you do that? You know, you're a racist or you're a weird liberal or whatever. Like, because I'm so afraid of what's going to happen.
That is fascinating.
I'm so glad I asked that question.
That's fascinating.
I had no idea.
The crazy thing about that is that commiseration can look like empathy, and commiseration oftentimes comes from fear. Right, like so
we're both afraid together.
We're both afraid together, and so we study, we understand each other, and we'll talk about it. And oh man, it makes me feel so much better that we're both in this line, and it's taking too long, and we're relating with one another because we're complaining about the cashier that's taking too long to check the next person's line, or is leaving to go get more cash to fill the cash box or whatever. Pick your thing. Commiseration can feel like empathy, but it's not, which is such a deception. Man, that is a fascinating study.
Well, because empathy is, I disagree with you, but I understand why.
Yes, it is.
Whereas commiseration is like, yeah, we both hate that person together.
Yes, but it can feel the same.
Right.
And so it can be really deceptive in that, because it can be like, well, I have empathy because how about all these people that, and really you're just describing yourself and everyone like you.
Yeah.
And it's a false form of empathy, because empathy actually enters into the picture of something that you haven't experienced or maybe you even disagree with, like you were saying.
Yeah. And it's definitely different from sympathy. Sympathy is like sharing pain. Empathy is just understanding where you're coming from.
Yes.
Like, I don't agree with you, but I understand. So if I talk to someone who's an atheist and they're like, I can't believe in God because of all the violence in the Old Testament. Empathy says, yeah, that is tough. I get that,
I can understand how it's a barrier.
As opposed to like, how dare you question my savior? I hate you, like, whoa, hold on. Right. And politically, I land more to the right of the spectrum. But like people that don't, like, I'm like, I understand where you're coming from. I get it. I don't agree with necessarily, but I understand. And my ability to understand where you're coming from keeps me from throwing rocks at you. It allows me to still serve and love and be kind to you. So yeah, empathy, I think, fear is the enemy of empathy. And so in this season of Rise City Church, choosing, and fear is an emotion, so it's hard to say choose. But Paul does say, and I don't want to ramble here, but let me take a precedent. Paul says, rejoice at all times. Well, that's an emotion. How do you do it? Whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, whatever is right, think on such things.
Good.
Okay, well, if fear is the opposite emotion, then whatever is lovely, whatever is noble, whatever is right, just think on such things. So your level of fear, just like your level of joy, is going to be based on what you fill your mind with. So as a Christian, if I want to have more empathy and love, I've got to fill my mind with things that cause empathy and trust in God and trust in his goodness and hope, rather than filling my mind with all the stuff that makes me afraid.
Good.
So
I love that.
The same is true of attenders of Rise City Church. Okay, over this next season, will you be filling your mind with things that make you afraid of what could happen? What if they hire the wrong person? What if this person comes in and changes this? I don't know. Will you sit in your huddles and get coffee and be like, I'm so afraid of what they're going to do? Or can you, even right now, like you did yesterday, take a group of people out to Lindo Lake and give ice cream and serve and love? Like, rather than living in your fear right now, what if we lived in love and said, like, let's not just sit around talking about what might go wrong. Let's go make things right now. And I think like that, like speaking more in hope and living in hope and battling the fear is actually going to give us more empathy and courage and joy when the new person takes over and God says, this is where you're going.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm trying to do.
That's good.
It's a great reminder.
Yeah.
Awesome.
This is fun.
It's a good digging deeper, guys. So good questions, Ben.
Thanks, man.
Man, if you guys are wondering if Ben is a planner, I hope that today's episode showed you. He has a whole computer filled with notes.
He just closed it so you couldn't see it.
So, man, I was like, man, he's got some more questions there. Let him ask them. That's good. So, there's probably like 45 that he didn't get to today, but we're out of time for this digging deeper. So, I guess we'll see you next time. It's been fun, guys.
Yeah, we'll be back with the next letters of Revelation, and we'll be good.
Pergamum and Smyrna.
Yeah, we're gonna put them together because they both kind of deal with. He addresses both the same issue with them, like how they're responding to persecution. So it'll be
good.
a hot topic.
Hot topic. Get ready and see you guys. Hot pockets. Hot topic. Hot topic. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll see you guys this Sunday, and then we'll see you next time on Digging Deeper.
See you guys.